are discussing on the right of surrogacy, then you are looking on the reproductive autonomy of a woman with disabilities. Then also you are looking into some of you are looking into the marital rape, the sexual autonomy of a woman to decide whether or not to go on with her pregnancy as a part of marital rape, or the victims of sexual exploitation. So if the rehabilitating agencies or the healthcare forum is providing a right to them, a mechanism for them to be rehabilitated, what about the pregnancy that has been induced to them as part of their sexual work? So whether they have got a choice to decide to continue with the pregnancy or whether to terminate that. So all these abstracts I find equally interesting. Basically, going through all these papers, all of the paper presenters were having the basic platform, like even though you are having the legislative or the policy framework or the judicial approach in this area, there is a lacuna that we find in the practical implementation of all these suggestions. Whether it is societal, because it has to start from the society. Even though you have got a legislative framework or a policy framework, this thought that the gender equality should be imbibed from the societal or from the family aspect, that has to be imbibed. So that thought is being carried in all the papers that you are putting forth. So we will be going on with the discussion, but basically if you look into the judicial decisions which give strengthening to whatever constitutional or the human right parameters that we have, basically the judgment in Navjot Singh Johar, where you find that the landmark judgment which provides for sexual autonomy to women, which has decriminalized adultery as well as homosexuality, that is empowering women to have a right to sexual autonomy, that has been put forth in Navjot Singh Johar. And also if you look into the Puttaswamy judgment, which is giving autonomy to the woman as part of Article 21, as part of her personal liberty and right to dignity. Again, you look into Independent Thought versus Union of India, the landmark judgment which provides you the reproductive rights that has been granted to a girl, irrespective of her marital status. So these three judgments, through these three judgments, judiciary has empowered whatever constitutional and human right mandate that has been rendered through the legislative as well as the policy framework. So we will be going on to the papers. I think we will be giving 10 minutes each for each presentation, and maximum 1 more minute you can take for a concluding remark. Basically 15 or 20 minutes we will be keeping apart for a discussion of so in between you may not be asking questions, you can keep your questions, and through the student coordinator you can raise questions after towards the end. The questions to the paper presenters can be put forth. So that's what I feel. How, if it's okay for you, we will go like that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for setting the tone for our discussions ahead.
Now let's move on to the paper presentation, ma'am. Okay, now we move on to the paper presentation, ma'am. First, Datta, Assistant Professor and Ma'am, Nabilida Datta.
Yes, I'm there, ma'am. Am I audible? Ma'am, should I start?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You can start.
Is my PPT visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon to all of you present here. Today, I would like to present my topic, which is the reproductive choice, a fundamental right of women. The entire study has been done on secondary sources, that is, literary sources. I have tried to look into the constitutional and the legal aspect of the fundamental right of a woman regarding the reproductive health or the reproductive choice. Now, when we look at health, it is basically a fundamental human right and a worldwide social goal. Every government should try and provide healthcare to all its citizens. We find health as a right in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Right. But just looking alone at health is not enough. Health is an intersectoral concept. Now, if we want to really realize the right to health, we also need to look into other interconnected rights, that is, right to food, education, environment, housing, working condition, poverty, and so on. Now, right to health is not specifically listed among the fundamental rights given to every citizen. However, Article 21 of the Constitution states that no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to the procedure established by the law. The Supreme Court judgment has extended the scope of Article 21. The right to health has been recognized by the Supreme Court as a fundamental right under Article 21 in the historic judgment of Consumer Education and Research Center versus Union of India. Reproductive health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well being, and not merely the absence of infirmity or disease in all matters relating to reproductive system and to its function and processes. It has a wide scope. Uh, it includes contraception, abortion, maternal and newborn care, infertility, reproductive cancer, sexual or intimate partner violence, which must be avoided at any cost, HIV/AIDS, and sexually transmitted diseases. The International Conference Population Development Program of Action states that reproductive health implies that people live a satisfying and safe sex life and have the capability to reproduce and the freedom to decide if, like when, how, and how often to do so. So this is where the concept of reproductive choice comes in. It is like a woman should have the right to decide whether she wants to have a sex life, how often she wants to do, when she wants to do. Now, reproductive health care is a prerequisite to the economic and the social, social, and human development. Now, reproductive health is also a very important component of human development. Needs the newborn basically depends on the needs of the mother. It includes nutrition available to the mother at the time of pregnancy, an important component of human development. Reproductive choice. The right to reproductive choice.
Can I just interrupt you? There seems to be a connection problem. You are breaking sometime. I don't know if it's just for me, but yeah. But I think your slides are very clear.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am. You're clear now.
Yeah, thank you. Now, the right to reproductive choice means that the women have the right to choose whether or not to reproduce. including the right to decide whether to carry, terminate an unwanted pregnancy, and the right to choose the preferred method of family planning and contraception. So we, as women, we have the right to decide whether we want to reproduce or whether we don't want to go for it. If we want to continue with it or we want to terminate it, and we should all have access to different family planning methods, and we should also have the autonomy to decide which method we should go for. So, autonomy very major role to if you look into the productive choice, if you look into some of the constitutional rights, like the Article 21 states that no person should be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to the procedure established by the law. Article 21 secures two rights, the right to life and the right to personal liberty. But in our country, we see a lot of maternal deaths happening. So maternal mortality rate is one of the most indicators of looking into the health state of the country. Article 14, if you look, that speaks about equality before law. The state shall not equality uh, on the grounds of religion, race, caste, creed. Now, Article 15 speaks of prohibition against discrimination in any of because of religion, caste, creed, sex, or the place of birth. From the Legal Terms Act, a woman has the right to take up the decision whether the woman wants to terminate the pregnancy after the first 12 weeks and in consultation with one doctor. If it is a 20-week, then there's a requirement of two doctors, whether giving birth would cause an unjust physical and mental harm to the women. If it is proved that there would be some sufficient going to harm, and then that medical treatment can be terminated. Or the child would be born with severe defects. The woman may decide that she would not continue with pregnancy. Now, if you look into the legal decisions, which gives the women more autonomy regarding productive choice, Swami judgments specifically recognize the constitutional right of women to make productive choices as a part of personal liberty under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Suchita Goswami versus Chandigarh administration held that reproductive rights includes women's entitlement to carry a pregnancy to its full term, to give birth, and to subsequently raise children. And these rights form a part of Indian women's right to privacy and dignity and bodily integrity. I think I'm facing some technical issues. I'm not able to change.
The slides, ma'am, you're not able to change the slides?
No, I'm not able to.
Okay.
Move it.
Is this what?
No.
No. Okay.
This is a 10th slide now, so if only two more slides remain, so I think she can present whatever she wants to present.
Yes. Ma'am, I just the last slide, which I was supposed to come up with, basically spoke about, like we spoke about the constitutional rights. We said about the laws which are enacted. We spoke about different judgments which have been given, which are very positive for a woman. But if we look into the reality, it is not such. A woman is still not that conscious. It is not about only when we speak of women, it is not only of women who are residing in a urban area, but also women who are there in the rural areas, like who have lack of any sort of autonomy. So reproductive self-determination is yet a reality for most women. So there is an immense need to educate and inform them about their reproductive rights. Informed decisions and choice related to reproduction is basically linked with life with dignity. There is basically need to focus on counseling people on the different family planning methods, how to take care of a pregnant woman, focus more on antenatal care so that we can prevent maternal deaths, access to treatment of sexually transmitted diseases, focus on how we can reduce maternal mortality, promote gender equality. So men must be encouraged to be more involved in the entire process. They should understand women's needs, choices, and their rights in reproductive health and give them their due respect. So there is need to create a lot of community awareness and instill a concern among women about their health. Women must basically have the ability to decide what they want in their life when they want to start a family and the spacing between their children. So, with this, I would like to end my presentation.
Um, Nabadnida, can you put on the slide with regard to the MTP Act?
Yeah, I'm facing. Yes, ma'am.
So if you look into the MTP Amendment Act 2021, for 20 weeks also, opinion of one provider is required up to 20 weeks of gestation.
Okay, ma'am. Sorry, I missed it.
2021 Amendment Act, and also so that change is there. Like you can have you can seek safe abortion on the grounds of contraceptive failure, or there is an increase in the gestation limit up to 24 weeks for special categories of women also. So abortion can now be performed up to 24 weeks of pregnancy by the amendment in 2021. So basically, she was looking into right to health as a fundamental right, and she was also saying that the right to health is interconnected with all the other human rights. In order to facilitate all other human rights, the right to health is a pertinent right that has to be acquired. She was also looking into the scope of reproductive right and also the reproductive choice as part of fundamental right under 1421 and Article 15. So she was looking into some of the case laws also. So thank you, Nabadida.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, ma'am, about telling me about the amendment, which I will definitely include in my further research works.
Sure, sure.
Thank you.
Sri Lakshmi, we can move on to the next person who will be presenting the paper.
Yes. Ma'am, I'm to that.
Sri Lakshmi, maybe.
Angie Thomas, research scholar, GLC Ernakulam, to present the topic on reproductive choice and reproductive rights of the victims of sexual exploitation and sex trafficking.
Can I start? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. So, as the moderator said, my topic would be the reproductive right and choice of the victims of sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. Let me start off with the word right, which is, in fact, do I have the authority to make a decision? It's yes or no. Now, from
Move on to
rights,
the next participant.
am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, from rights arises the choice, and reproductive rights rest only on the recognition of reproductive choice. That's the foundation on which I am building up the paper. Tracking back to the roots of reproductive rights, those are the health rights that developed as part of the public health system. The three categories of reproductive rights, which I have categorized it as the right to reproductive choice with self-determination, the right to sexual and reproductive health services, information and education, right to equality and non-discrimination when it comes to the reproductive health and the decision making on reproductive choice. Therefore, from a broader perspective, reproductive health rights includes right to contraception, oral sterilization, right to abortion, right to adopt practices for fertility, right to access information on reproductive health, right to educate and appropriate medical assistance, maternity support and treatment, right to treatment for sexually transmitted diseases, freedom from coerced contraception. Now, reproductive choice, on the other hand, is a narrow frame in my study. It's the right to choose whether to embrace motherhood or not under free will. The denial of reproductive right is a violation of an individual's human right, but there is no single instrument on human rights dedicated exclusively to reproductive rights of an individual. The reproductive rights are protected through the application of human rights guidelines, national and international human rights laws and treaties, and the documents that embed reproductive rights within the human rights framework, which I have considered for the study, are the Tehran Conference of 1968, the World Conference on Human Rights held in 1993 that adopted the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action in consensus with the right to sexual and reproductive health, the International Conference on Population and Development held at Cairo in 1994, the Maputo Protocol, which is an African charter on the human rights that articulated women's reproductive rights in Africa, the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the European Convention of Human Rights, and most importantly, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that emphasized on the reproductive health, right not to die from preventable pregnancy-related causes, right to privacy, right to decide freely and without arbitrary interference on reproductive functions of the individual. Now, this being the premise of reproductive health, reproductive rights, and reproductive choice, let me draw your attention to the life of victims of sex trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation, as we call it in India. The protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, supplementing the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crimes, which was formulated in 2000, otherwise known as the Palermo Protocol, has defined trafficking, and that is what all the countries, the signatories, have followed when they define sex trafficking and trafficking-related issues. Now, victims of sex trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation are mainly women and children hailing from socially or economically vulnerable families. The vulnerability can be due to the poverty, societal isolation, drug addiction, lack of education and awareness, family violence, having history of child sexual abuse, etc. And the traffickers or the pimps who lure them into the trafficking ring under the pretext of love, job opportunity, marriage, better living conditions. These are the tools which the traffickers use to trap the victims. And the vulnerable victims are forced into sex trade through mental and physical abuse. Most victims are raped, starved, and abused until they succumb to work in the flesh trade industry for 7 days a week, 12 to 18 hours a day, serving about 15 to 30 clients on a daily basis, according to the reports. Getting on to the reproductive health of these victims of sexual exploitation, they don't have the freedom to use contraceptives as they are the slaves of sex trade. They don't have the choice. It's the customer who says whether to use or not to use a contraceptive. Now, secondly, they may or may not get pregnant. The victims don't really have a choice in childbearing. Most victims are forced to subject oneself to unsafe abortion practices, mainly by the traffickers, and these victims don't have any choice. Some people are forced to continue with pregnancy so that the traffickers can have more control over the victim. And the victims are usually denied treatments for sexually transmitted diseases, and proper medical assistance are not being given during the maternity period. Now, all these scenes happen when a person is a slave, is considered in trafficking or commercially being exploited by a trafficker. Now, under given circumstances, let's check on what happens when a victim of sex trafficking or a commercial sexual exploitation is being rescued by the police or the anti-human trafficking unit in a raid in India, for example. An FIR is registered against the known or else the unknown trafficker and the customer, and the victim is the key witness to the crime, which normally has very few evidence to support. The police takes the victim for the initial medical examination, the details of which is restricted to very few words in the report, which I have personally verified. Thirdly, the victim is moved to a rescue home or a government shelter where she will be detained for a period varying from 3 weeks to 3 years. There are victims who have been staying with the rescue homes for more than 3 years, according to my research. And if she is pregnant when she has been rescued and taken to a shelter, and if she is pregnant during that time, instead of informing her about the reproductive rights and helping her in making an informed decision, the officials at shelter, let that be the NGO, let that be the governmental shelter, they arbitrarily force the victim for an abortion in some cases, and in other cases where the victims want an abortion to pregnancy, but the authorities, including the medical team and the court, has prevented the victim from going for a legal termination of pregnancy, even within the time period stipulated by law. I have got the case decisions in Suchitra Srivastava versus Chandigarh administration, where reproductive autonomy has been assured by the Supreme Court. But in 2017, in Mrs. Z versus State of Bihar, Supreme Court had denied the medical termination of pregnancy of an HIV positive pregnant woman who was 17 weeks pregnant, and she was a rape victim, and she was forced to deliver the child based on the court decision. Now, access to abortion for rape victims without the need of judicial authorization was given in 2013 in Hallo B versus State of Madhya Pradesh. Now, we have got the law standing for and against MTP in case of rape victims and the victims of sexual abuse or commercial sexual exploitation, taking both stands. High courts and the Supreme Court's taking both stands for and against, but most of them are against the woman's choice. Now, there are reported instances where a victim did not want to continue with the pregnancy, but was forced to proceed with childbearing. And when she wanted to embrace motherhood and rear the child after the childbirth, the rescue home authorities had forced her to give the child in abortion. And this was being reported by the Reuters in an article on trafficking in persons, abortion situation in India. And that is 2021 April article. Now, looking at MTP from the legal perspective, the Indian Penal Code has criminalized voluntary causing miscarriage, even if it's done with the consent of the pregnant woman, except in cases to save woman's life. Now, MTP Act was in fact enforced to liberalize abortion and to provide access to safe abortion under specific grounds and with approval of registered medical practitioners and with judicial authorization. In January 2021, Union Cabinet amended the MTP Act, allowing the woman to seek abortion as part of reproductive right and gender justice. Amendment raised the upper limit of MTP from 20 to 24 weeks for women, including rape survivors, victims under similar circumstances. Now, trafficked women are normally not being made aware of the reproductive rights, the right to abortion, right to bear and maintain a child without fear and coercion, the financial support from the government to raise the child, the medical assistance available to the victim, etc. Instead, girls who are pregnant, rescued and admitted to shelter homes are reminded of stigmatization and responsibility of maintaining an illegitimate child, influencing victims' reproductive choice. Now, in 2006, the Judicial Handbook on Combating on Women and Child for commercial sexual exploitation contained exhaustive guidelines in India to the central and the state governments to prevent sex trafficking, the victim protection, legal support and empowerment measures for the victims. But the lacuna exists where the government in India has not given due consideration to the need of setting up a machinery to address the special need of victims who are pregnant out of the sexual abuse and who are in the rescue homes looking forward to restart life in a different manner, living behind the past. So to conclude, the victims of sex trafficking or sexual abuse are to be assisted by the government by providing a standard of life capable of ensuring their rehabilitation and reintegration, giving due emphasis to the reproductive choice and reproductive health. Government should assure, that's what my findings and suggestion would be, to government should assure that appropriate and secure accommodation should be provided, because insecurity is what lead them to go for an abortion most of the times. So appropriate and secure accommodation need to be provided, psychological and material assistance need to be given. They must be provided proper information and counseling in this regard. It's their choice to go on with the pregnancy or to terminate the pregnancy under safe conditions. So government should be sensitive to the needs of the victim, basically, and a victim-centered approach in reproductive health care, which is like a medical legal assistance with voluntary and non-judgmental approach should be taken. And they should be furnished with all available options to at the right time for self-determining one's reproductive choice, because there are certain times when at 16 weeks of pregnancy the woman would opt for an abortion, and she has to go through all the legal procedures and the court cases, and at 32 weeks of pregnancy when she is given a right to abortion, that's truly injustice and unfair. So also, finally, support should be taken and given from the NGOs who are actually working with the anti-trafficking units, because they have better equipped in all areas when it comes to the health of victim, the mental and the physical health. So this is what I have found from my studies on reproductive health and choice of women who are victims of trafficking. I remain.
Thank you, Anju. Thank you for an in-depth study on the reproductive rights of women, especially those who are into the trafficking, who have been lured into the trafficking business. So basically, she has based her premise on the international conventions regarding the rights of women undergoing trafficking. And also she was also looking into the vulnerability of the victims of trafficking, those who have been trapped into the sex trade, and basically the unsafe abortion practices that has been carried on these women. And also she is looking into the rescue shelters where informed choices are not made available to the victims of sex trafficking. So basically Anju was highlighting on the reproductive rights and choices of reproduction among the survivors of trafficking. That's important, and she is also highlighting on the need for specialized support mechanism for pregnant victims of sexual abuse. She was also rightly pointing out to the inconsistency in judicial standards with regard to decisions or the choices that the victims of trafficking has been taking with regard to their right to abortion. Like if you look into the judgments where rape survivors or trafficking survivors come before the court with regard to their choice with regard to termination of pregnancy and the right to abortion, we find that there is an inconsistent standard, in the sense that when we balance the right to life or bodily integrity or dignity of the unwed mother or the trafficked woman vis-a-vis the right of the child to be born, basically in the later end of the pregnancy period, you don't find a consistent standard, and the court has also always been giving different judgments in case to case basis. If you look into the high court judgments or the Supreme Court judgments, we find that basically the fact situation of that particular case, and also the medical reports with regard to the health statistics and vitals of the woman as well as the child in the womb, that's also taken into consideration by the court, and in most cases we find that the court takes the side of the right of the child to be born, basically in high term in pregnancy period, because the child in the womb also has got a right to life. So balancing these two rights, weighing the two balances, when the court feels that the child be given an opportunity to be born, we find that the stand of the court is always, not always, but in most cases it is inclined towards the right of the child to be born. So that's what we find in the judicial decision. So thank you, Anju, for an in-depth study into the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I invite. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, ma'am. Next, I invite Kushbu Natholia, Research Scholar, Banastali Vidyapeeth, Rajasthan, to present on the topic Immaterial Surrogacy Regulation Bill 2020 for LGBT community.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry because of some technical glitch. I had to log out and now I've logged in again. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, to the chair and to the fellow representatives. The topic for my presentation today is Immaterial Surrogacy Regulation Bill. When we talk about surrogacy in itself, a manner, a method, a mode, which is artificially made in order to let the intending parent who are unable to reproduce, who are unable to have their own child, to, to enjoy parenthood with the help of somebody. If we see the recent surrogacy bill, which has been there which has been the matter of town, which has been the talk of the town since 2019. It is said as it is infringing the rights of the same-sex couples, the rights of widow who wants to have a child, the right of the parents who already have a child and who wishes to have another, so on and so forth. My area of concern here is with respect to the same-sex couples, since it forms a part of my PhD thesis. Well, LGBT community, if we see, have long been deprived of various fundamental and human rights. And surrogacy bill is an addition to the same. If we go through the provisions of the surrogacy bill, it talks about that there are minimum criteria which need to be followed, and one of the major criteria which acts as a hurdle for the same-sex couples is that it can be followed by the husband and wife who are legally wedded to each other with the age of so and so. In India, if we see today, same-sex marriage is allowed. But when we talk about the legality of the same-sex marriage, it is a big question mark. And when the legality of the marriage is a big question mark, then the couple, the same-sex couple, are kept out of the purview to undergo surrogacy, whether as intending or the one who are there to help others and be a surrogate mother. This in itself is a violation of their fundamental right, the golden triangle if we take cumulatively, violation of their human right, and also a discrimination with respect to the matrimonial laws we have in India for the minority section dealing with the LGBT community. The law, the surrogacy law, which is falling in the secular law tier for the family law system in India. If we see, we have a 3-tier system wherein we have a secular law, personal laws, and the optional law. If the secular law in itself is going to discriminate between the couples, then what will we expect from the personal laws? The major agenda of coming into the sphere of secular law is that it should not be discriminating anyone with respect to their religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, so on and so forth. And when right to marry has been declared as a fundamental right, and right to have a partner of your choice has been declared a fundamental right, then the matrimonial right which falls after it, why is that kept away from the purview of the LGBT, of the same-sex couple, is the question. And why is this surrogacy bill, which is being made in order to help the parents who are unable to conceive to opt for the method of surrogacy, is keeping LGBT out of its purview? That's the major area of question which I would like to take up in the paper on this particular topic. So that's all about the presentation for the topic. Thank you. Hello. Hello.
Thank you, Kushbu, for your paper. So basically, she has been addressing the Navdeep Johar decision where homosexuality has been decriminalized, but many of the domestic and civil rights that has not been available to the homosexual or LGBT persons. I think you are. Am I echoing? So if somebody is keeping their audio on, just mute it when other persons are talking. Otherwise, it will echo. Okay, now is it clear? So basically, Kushbu has been highlighting on the rights of the LGBT people, and even though she was addressing that homosexuality has been decriminalized by the Navdeep Johar decision, but many of the domestic and civil rights is not available to the LGBT community, and if you look into the recent surrogacy bill, the rights has not been allowed to the LGBT couple or the same-sex couple or single parents or living couples. So that's a lacuna that we have to address in the new bill 2020 with regard to the rights of these special category of people. Maybe by future public opinion or discussions. We have been decriminalizing upon the homosexual couples at a later point of time. Maybe the social as well as the legal norms or the canvas may be a bit broadened so that the living couple or the single parents or the LGBT couple who want to have a child of their own, so they are also provided with the right to surrogacy. So we can hope a future amendment to this particular the legal provision, but maybe because of the societal norms and parameters, maybe when the canvas or the mentality of the society gets a bit broadened, now that which it seems a taboo may be welcomed by people, but it may take a bit more time. So that's what I feel. But she has got a point there that when they want to have a child by means of surrogacy, so that right should not be denied to them. Thank you, Kush.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable feedback.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I invite K. Vanitha Kumar, Advocate, APK Law Firm, Coimbatore, to present on the topic, a study on women's reproductive and health rights.
Good afternoon to everybody. Am I audible? Am I visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you. Today I'm going to present my paper on the topic is study on reproductive and health rights. So from the word, the women, which we comes to know is nothing but she is a gift of God. So the word women includes the word men. She is not that much as stronger as men, but she is mentally, she is stronger, not a physically. So this reproductive and health right is said to be one of the important human rights, which is given by the nature. So the human rights may be called as a nature right, or a inherent right, or inalienable right, and inseparable right. So these reproductive rights of women is one of the most important and inherent rights, which is vested naturally, and it cannot be taken from her through any law or through by any person. Such a valuable right is said to be the right which we all have in this world. So today, my paper is mainly related to the rights, which is reproductive rights, which is recognized by the legal agencies and the international agencies, how they are protected. So human rights is nothing but is a moral principle which specifies the standards of a human behavior, and it is protected by the national and international law. So human rights impose many obligations on the person to respect the human rights, and at the same time, it cannot be taken away except by the due process of the law on a specific circumstances. So we all know very well how these human rights are evolved in this world. It is only through a charter named as a Magna Carta or a Great Charter, which is one of the world's first documents, which mainly speaks about the legal rights of the human beings. It's nothing but the human rights. So the World Health Organization defines a reproductive right as is a basic right of an individual to decide freely and responsibly the number of spacing and the children had to have information and to means to do so, and the right to attain the highest standard of sexual and reproductive health. So the UDHR in the international conference in the year 20th year anniversary, it is adopted a declaration that is every human being, that is not only human being, every woman has a right to determine freely and responsibly the number and the spacing of the children. This is not possible without the participation of the men. So men is also important person in bearing of a child. So in the year 1969, the UN General Assembly passed a declaration on a social progress and development in a Tehran proclamation, and urged that every government to provide the couples not only the education but also the necessary means to enable them to exercise, to determine freely and responsibly the number and the spacing of the children. So these reproductive rights of a women, how it is incorporated in our Indian Constitution and other Constitution. Let us see how they are incorporated. We all know very well about the Constitution. So this Constitution under Article 21 of this Indian Constitution mainly speaks about the right to life, liberty and security of the person. So this reproductive right is not a particular article which is mentioned in this. It's not specifically mentioned, but it is incorporated in Article 21 of this Indian Constitution. So this reproductive right is nothing but the right which is provide her to safe and a legal abortion, and right to control one's own reproductive functions, and right to make a reproductive choices free from any coercion, discrimination, and violence. So these reproductive rights prevent from the gender discrimination or gender-based practices, and also it provides the education related to the sexual transmitted diseases and the freedom from the coerced sterilization and the contraception method. So this Indian Constitution, it states that women has a right to security, that is a right to life, right to freedom from torture, right to health, right to privacy, right to it is right against poverty, right to education, and right to prohibition from all kinds of discrimination. Not only this in the part 3 of Indian Constitution mentions about the right of the women, but it is also mentioned under part 4 of the directive principles of state policies. So the state policies the state governments have the obligations to perform the rules and the principles which is incorporated in order to promote the women's reproductive rights and the fundamental rights. So the important landmark cases relating to this reproductive rights is nothing but the Puttaswamy versus Union of India, as earlier discussed by our colleagues. So these rights is meant for the reproductive choices. It should be given to the women without any discriminations. So this reproductive right should be recognized as a fundamental right, and if any law is passed infringing the fundamental right, it should be struck down according to the provisions and the guidelines which is given in the former cases by the Supreme Court. So if any activities or if any actions are made for forced abortion and sterilization, it can be prevented only by the legislation. It is passed by the central government and the state government. So according to UN's report in 2014 states that the forced sterilization is a severe violation of women's reproductive rights, and it is a severe method of medical control of women's fertility without the consent of women. So the forced abortion and the sterilization is not new, but its origin is commenced from in the year 1928 itself. We all know about the sexual Sterilization Act, which makes the provision to make the women to force abortion and the sterilization. But this act is repealed in the year 1972. In AS Hungary, in this case, it is decided that the forced sterilization of women leads to the violation of a gross violation of a human rights. So, in the landmark cases, it is decided by the Supreme Court, that is Suchitra Shrivastava versus Chandigarh. In this case, the Supreme Court held that women's right to make a reproductive choice was a component of the right to personal liberty, which is enshrined in Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So these reproductive rights is not only protected by the by the Supreme Court, but also it is protected by the several international conventions by the United Nations organization. So in the year 1968, the International Conference on Civil and Political and Economic and Cultural Rights passed the International Conference on Population and Development in the year 1994. All these conferences mainly deals about the reproductive rights of the women and how the reproductive rights should be protected, and what are the ways in which the health care of the women to be taken into account. All these things are decided in these conferences only. So not only this, the UN allotted a fund for the advancement and the research of women, which is said to be an uniform. It's one of the international research which mainly focuses on the reproductive rights of the women, and it's also makes a training institution for the advancement of the women, which is termed as an INSTRA. Not only this, the Belgium platform option, which is used for an ICPD, is also defines about the reproductive health care and how the techniques and services that should be contribute for the reproductive health, and also prevents the and also provides a solution for the reproductive health problems. So these several working bodies under the international conferences and international conventions and the international treaties, they appointed several bodies in order to look after the reproductive rights of the women and the health care of the women. Such as the important bodies of UN, or first and foremost important organs is not important body is nothing but the Committee on Human Rights, and next Human Rights Council, and Commission on Status of Women, and Center for Human Rights, and Division for the Advancement of Women, and Office of a Special Advisor on Gender Issue, and Special Rapporteurs, and the regional bodies, the member states such as an NGOs and the Security Council. Not only this, the Committee on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights, and also the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, clearly indicates that health includes the sexual and the reproductive rights. So the health includes sexual and the reproductive rights. It all means that all the member states are bound to protect the women's sexual and the reproductive rights. So in spite of the actions taken by the committees and the special reporters, the women are still facing the several problems on the sexual and the reproductive rights. These problems should be cured only by the policies which should be enacted on the benefit of the women by the central and the state governments. And not only this, the Office of High Commission has also enacted the provisions relating to the reproductive rights of the women, and they also framed the policies and programs for promoting the right to health. So the member states and the other NGOs and the regional bodies are also, they want to take part in such programs, and they should implement the policies for the welfare and the benefit of this reproductive rights. So what are the factors which are affecting the reproductive rights that must be taken into consideration? The first factors which is affecting the reproductive rights is nothing but a lack of health knowledge. So today the people in the world, that is women, are not taking care of their health because of certain depression, because of certain works, and they are bound to look after their family, their society, everything they have to look after. So due to this, they were not taking care about their health. So due to proper health is not provided to, so no proper health is provided to such person, this also leads to certain issues. That it means they are subject to certain disease, which they are not able to come into the reproductive character. And next important factor is nothing but the population control. In order to bring the population control, the central government and state governments are enacting the family planning policies. So such policies are not aware of the women who are in the rural areas. Still in the urban cities and also in urban areas, the women who are not aware about the contraception methods and also the sterilization methods, and moreover they are afraid about the methods they were used, whether it will cause any dangerous or if it will cause any illness to their mind and the body. And third one is nothing but the poverty. So poverty is one of the most important factor for causing the lack or illness over the women. And next, insufficient policy controls. So today, India is to be the second place in the population. So this population should be controlled by the India only through the various enactment of the policies. So the policies, the family planning policies are not that much just sufficient. So insufficient policies are also there. Along with this, certain psychological factors also necessary for making this reproductive rights to be unsuccessful. So due to this factor, the women were lead to several kinds of health issues, such as the main issues which is prevailing all over the world is nothing but the diabetes. So this diabetes is mainly caused not to the food but due to the depression which is made to the women. So due to this, their diabetics also there is obstructions in bearing of the child, and not only this, a major problem in hormonal imbalance and obesity, smoking, and insufficient nutrition and autoimmune diseases are also the factors which leads to be the inconvenience to the development of the women's reproductive rights. So several policies and several policies were enacted in India. In recent policy which is made in Uttar Pradesh in order to prevent the overpopulation. So not only this, the central government passed several schemes which in order to improve the health of the women, such as Chiranjeevi Yojana scheme and Janani Shinshu Supresha scheme and Kasturiba Poshana scheme and Rashtriya Krishna scheme. And these are the important schemes which are mainly focusing on the health of the reproductive rights of women. So not only this, the International Day of Actions on Women's Health was celebrated by the United Nations Organization. Through this international day, several policies, several programs, and several awarenesses were given relating to the health and the mental care of the women, and also the reproductive rights which are related to the women. So many people in the world, they are not aware about the rights what they have. So such rights should be reached to the person only through this international conferences and this through this various programs. So my conclusion relating to this topic is nothing but the reproductive rights of women is not vested in the hands of women. Entirely, the reproduction right is not at all vested in the hands of women. It is vested with the family members of such women. So the family members should take care of the health of such women, and also the persons who are surrounding around her should also be provide the help to such women. So reproductive right is a state of a complete physical and a social well-being, not merely the absence of a disease or infirmity, but in all matters it is relating to the reproductive system and the functions and the process. So the reproductive health is therefore implies that the people are able to have satisfying the safe sex life, and they have the capacity to reproduce and freedom to decide how and often to do so. So this implicit is the last conditions that the rights of men and women to be informed, to have an access to an effective, affordable, and accessible method of family planning, including the method for regulation of fertility, the law. And the reproductive health is a reproductive right.
Interrupt you.
Choice.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you could wind up your chief arguments within the next 2 minutes, since Thank you, ma'am.
And health must be considered at the higher level. So reproductive rights of the women is with the policies made by the central government and the state government, and also with the society. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Yes.
Thank you, Advocate Vanitha. Now, she had been extensively looking into the factors affecting the reproductive rights of women. She was also looking into the central government schemes focusing on the reproductive rights of women, and she is basically advocating for autonomy of women with regard to her sexual rights, and basically her concern is for forced abortion and sterilization, particularly in unsafe health conditions which severely compromise the health of women. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I invite Nirnayak Gadekar, student, Amity University, Mumbai, to present the topic contraception, abortion and reproductive rights of women in India.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you are audible.
So first of all, I would like to take a moment to appreciate the institution for choosing it as a topic, because as we can see today in the conference as well, when we are giving the presentations or we are talking about the particular topic, most of the presenters here, I would say that all of the presenters present here today were the women. So we can see how much need is required in today's society to know about the reproductive rights in the world today. When we say about a reproductive right, it's just a woman who needs to, if it is just a woman who needs to realize that, if that's the concept in anyone's mind, so I would like to begin my presentation saying that no, it's not just a woman who needs to realize the concept about the reproduction or reproductive right. When a child or a reproduction, it takes 2% to 2%. So when it comes to the awareness or when it comes to speak about the rights and the implementation of a right, it involves many bodies that are behind it. So when we say about reproductive rights, how does the reproductive right or reproduction comes into the existence? So it is a need of a procreation or a reproduction. It is like reproduction is required for continuous existence of something in this world. Reproduction takes place because we want the existence of something to be ongoing in the world and to be in the environment, in the world, even after us. So when we speak about reproduction, it has been the concept that has been in the existence, and that's how we came into existence and we exist today. So reproduction was existing, but along with reproduction, even the abortion and contraception, these concepts are also very ancient and were in the existence from very prior time. The woman's control over their body is one of the very essential elements, and hence since the ancient time there exist various methods for undergoing the contraceptions or the abortions. The methods that were used prior were the using of liquid mercury, the exposure to the lead, using of the rocks, using of the metals, which were actually very harmful and had very adverse effect on the body. So when we speak about these two concepts, that is the contraception and the abortion, we think that there are two different concepts, which they are, but they are very similar when we talk about them. So the contraception is something, if the contraception and abortions are linked between two, the connection between two is always like inadequately addressed and hence is always misunderstood. The reproductive rights are one of the most important aspects of the human beings and are acknowledged in various domestic laws, international conventions on human rights, also the UN documents. Reproductive rights of women in India can be traced in Indian Constitution as fundamental rights, as the directive principle of state policy under the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act and the Child Marriage Act as well. So there are two concepts of reproductive health and reproductive right. So reproductive rights involves many concepts when we talk about it. I would like to go forward with the definition of it. The reproductive right embraces certain human rights that are already recognized in national law, international law, and international human rights documents and other consensus documents. These rights rest upon the recognition of the basic rights of all the couples and the individual to decide freely and responsibly the number, spacing, the timing of their children, and to have the information and means to do so, and the right to attain the highest standard of the sexual and the reproductive health. It also includes the right to make the decision concerning the reproduction fee, discrimination, coercion, and violation as expressed in the human rights document. Moving further, I would try to explain the similarities between the contraceptions and the abortion. The basic understanding of the biological factors of the human reproduction, it indicates that these both are the alternative ways of achieving the same result. The contraceptions and the abortions are interrelated. First, when the contraception is unable to regulate the fertility of a woman's body, and there is no other way, the woman would prefer to go for an adoption. Second, both abortion and contraception serves a similar purpose of spacing, but the contraceptions are considered to be more effective method for the purpose of spacing. Few relevant studies have also assisted that the women who have used contraceptions before would prefer to go for an abortion, but a woman who has undergone an abortion won't prefer to go for an abortion again. So here comes to the safety of a body. A contraception also, when we speak about the contraception, there have been various activities that have taken place internationally, I would like to speak, if I may say. The contraception, the material or the products that are used to make a contraception, they have also had very different adverse effect on the bodies. The material or the chemicals used or the raw materials that are used for a contraception are very harmful for women's body as well. So most of the time it happens that they have the thing in their mind that let's not go for the contraception and the abortion. But when it keeps on happening, a woman can't go and undergo abortion on a various basis again and again. So the contraceptions are considered to be a more convenient way as compared to the abortions. Now I would like to explain the outlining of the legislation, the conventions of the international documents that exist in related to the abortion and the contraception. First, I would like to speak about the Cairo Declaration on the Population and Development. The aim of the declaration was to realize the balance between the population and the natural resources. So when we say about, so this declaration, it saw a population in a very broader aspect, in a sustainable development aspect for the betterment of the humankind. So that it promoted the access to family services, information, education, and support the provisions regarding the family planning as well as reproductive. ICPD influenced the National Population Policy 2000, which focused on the target-free approach to meet the family planning need for the couple. The stress on the word target free is to be given, because when we say the family planning services or the national policies regarding the family planning, most of the time it happens that a target is given and they are being forced, they are just told that they have to go through the process of abortions or everything. But the consent of the other person that they want to go, the safeguards measure, and it is given as a consent, should be taken into consideration. Next, the medical termination of the pregnancy. So in India, the legislation of abortion, that is the medical termination of pregnancy, came into existence based on the recommendation of Shantilal Shah Committee Report 1966. The primary issues that were addressed by this act were the safety measures to undergo the safe abortion, as the requirement and the qualification of the physician, hygienic condition to be undertaken, and the family constraints that a woman faced to undergo. There were various amendments and the changes that took place in the act consequently. Most importantly speaking, the Indian Constitution. Obviously, the Indian Constitution is a core document for when we talk about India. These rights to abortion were also mentioned in one of the case, Suchita Srivastava, and it was said that a right to life, to Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. When we say right to life, even a woman has a right to life. Most of the time it's happened that the unwanted pregnancy are the result of something that might be a bad experiences. For example, the marital rape, or as the fellow representatives have said, that they might be the victim of some crimes. There might be various reasons for because of which they don't want to continue with the pregnancy. So it is a right to life of a woman. We say they have the pregnancy, and we say that that is a right of a child as well. But at the result child, if it is coming into the world where there are no proper requirement, the basic requirements of life are not provided, are not supported by it, so the life eventually becomes miserable. So the right to life also has the right to basic life and the quality life. It should not just be the animal existence of a human being that is coming into the existence, as well as the suffering that the person that is giving birth should go through. Further, I would like to mention the social factors that affect the abortion and the contraceptions in India. So even though the abortion has been legalized in India through the Medical Termination Act, and access to safe and qualitative services with result to it is still limited. There have been various studies in the various states of India. I will be having the details mentioned in the paper regarding the same, which say that the safety measure when it comes to the proper training, qualified physicians to undergo the process are not being followed. So even if the women go for abortion or they go to undertake the contraception procedure for not continuing with the pregnancy, the proper treatments are not provided. So the quality of abortion, according to me, the legislation or the existence of an act on paper is not something that changes or improves something or the concept in the society. For the change to take place, for the betterment of something, there should be the proper implementation of it. There should be committees, and committees, when I say committees, the committees should be the ones that work for the betterment of it. It should not be just we have something there, it is legalized, there are provisions regarding it. There is everything in existence. But if it is not the way it is supposed to be, having no matter how many legislations we have, no matter how many international conventions we are signatory to, is even speaking of the even speaking about the human right convention that we are signatory to, it provides the basic human rights. So not giving a woman to right to have control over her body, is that not a human right? It is considered to be the human right, but still, in spite of we being the fact as a signatory to it, it is not being followed. So I would like to conclude saying that we do have legislations, we do have policies, we have provisions, we have everything into existence, but the lack of this legislation, the lack of the committees or the execution process or the implementation of this has a very adverse effect on the society. As one of the presenter has also mentioned this, that we go for abortion and we start with the prosecution, and the prosecution goes on for so long that by the time the order for the abortion is given, the time period in which the abortion is to be done is passed. So it is a violation of human right. It is a violation of a fundamental right under the Indian constitution. So it's not that we don't have legislation, we don't have the provisions. In spite of having everything, there are many lacunas. There are social restraints, there are family restraints. So to work over all these things, I think there is a requirement for better implementations of the laws and the policy in the given time. So I will be looking forward to explore these topics in more depth in my paper. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nirnaya. So her paper was basically on contraception, abortion, and the reproductive rights of women. And basically, she was drawing a parallel between contraception and abortion, and she was also looking into the health issues that is associated with both contraception as well as abortion. And she was also looking into the international conventions and protocols regarding the same, and as well as various committee reports in this particular area. Again, she also has got a concern with regard to the unbalanced or maybe we can say that there is no settled judicial position with regarding whether to go on with an abortion or whether we have to look on for the right of a child to be born into the world, which the judiciary has been propounding in most of the cases. So her concern is, even if the child is put into the world, and if the governmental mechanism is also supporting the right to life of that particular child, will the child be, her concern is that will the child be really having a right, a dignified life when the biological parents or the mother who has been forced to go on with that pregnancy doesn't want that particular. So basically it has got an emotional side on also to that particular issue. But basically when the fact circumstances are before the courts, basically to continue with that pregnancy or to terminate it, basically they rely on factual evidences like medical reports, the physical condition of the mother, and as well as the health of the embryo in determining whether to continue or terminate that particular pregnancy. Okay, Nirnaya, thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
As our next presenter, we have our student coordinator herself, Sri Lakshmi S., who is presenting on marital rape, a threat to reproductive choice of women. Welcome, Sri Lakshmi.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, all. Today I'm going to present before you on the topic marital rape, a threat to reproductive rights of women. I think there are mainly two significance to this topic. That the first one is that reproductive rights of a woman who undergone marital rape has a choice for abortion or not. The second significance is that the violation of women's reproductive rights during the time of pregnancy is relevant or not through marital rape. The reproductive rights are the rights or freedoms guaranteed to the individuals in relation to the reproduction and reproductive health. The World Health Organization specifies that reproductive rights rest on the recognition of the basic rights of all couples and individuals to decide freely and responsibly the number, spacing, and timing of their children, and to have the information and means to do so, and the right to attain the highest standard of sexual reproductive health. Thus, reproductive rights are substantial to the realization of all human rights. The recognition of reproductive rights in various constitutions and international documents could be taken as move towards the recognition of women's liberty in relation to these decisions. The Constitution of India acknowledges a significant number of rights as fundamental rights, and the government is under an obligation to provide, including the right to equality, which is coming under the Article 14, and non-discrimination under the Article 15. And the right to life, Article 21, which through the judicial interpretation is understood to include the right to life, include what actually right to health, dignity, freedom from torture and ill treatment, and privacy. Additionally, India is a signatory to various international conventions, which include the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Rights of Children, and the Convention on Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, all of which acknowledges women's reproductive rights. Further, Article 51 Clause C states that the state has to be bound to respect the treaty obligation of the treaty obligation that is made by the state. In recent times, Indian courts have given few striking judgments perceiving women's reproductive rights as component of the inalienable survival rights, implicitly protected under the fundamental right as right to life. The worldwide evolution of jurisprudence on the reproductive rights framework is based on two principal keys, that is the right to reproductive health care, and the second is the right to reproductive self-determination. There are mainly two legislations that covers the reproductive rights of women in India, and that are the Prevention of Child Marriage Act 2006 and the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act 1971. And the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act contains provisions with respect to the abortion. It contains certain grounds under which the abortion is legal in India. It further provides that abortion can be allowed up to 12 weeks with help of one medical practitioner, and about 12 to 20 weeks with the help of all two medical practitioners. And after 20 weeks can be allowed only on the serious issues or serious health grounds of the women. Although these acts provide certain protection to women against the violation of their reproductive rights, there is a need to amend them so as to afford protection of reproductive rights. For once, abortion after 20 weeks of pregnancy must be allowed for broader grounds so as to give recognition to the woman's right to reproductive autonomy. Moreover, Section 313, 314, 315, 316 of the IPC contain provisions for the punishment in case of abortion and miscarriage, which is done with the intention of causing death of the unborn child. Thus, not only is fully autonomy not provided in case of abortion in India, but it is also made cognizable offense under the IPC. This implies that abortion in India is only legal if done in good faith for medical purpose. If rape is a genus, we all know that marital rape is one of its species. It can be defined as an unwanted sexual intercourse by a man with his own wife without her express or implied consent, either forcefully or by use of threat or coercion of physical harm. The essential feature of the marital rape is the relationship of husband and wife between the man and the woman. This makes the issues more socially relevant. Like in rape, in marital rape also, there is no consent of the woman, and there is use of force by the man for sexual intercourse. Though society as a whole considers rape as a serious crime, and law also gives great importance in punishing the rapist. But rape laws do not give any protection to the married woman in the case their husband forcefully have sexual intercourse on them. Society as a whole also does not consider marital rape as an issue of any significance and gives full immunity to husband. Married women who are subject to this kind of sexual violence by their own husband have no place to go, and they cannot complain this to their family due to the societal pressure, and also they cannot go to the police because law does not recognize marital rape as a crime. So that from these whole thing, we can, India being one of the first countries to legislate legal framework ensuring the access to abortion and contraception, there are still barriers that are experienced by women which restrict them from fully exercising their reproductive rights. However, the courts in India have adopted a progressive approach for recognizing the following reproductive rights to be a part of right to life, such as maternal health and maternal health, child marriage, access to contraception, and abortion and reproductive autonomy. Until 2008, the judicial precedent set in regards to abortion in India was regressive, which maintained that a woman's choice to abort without her husband's consent could amount to mental cruelty. However, in 2009, the law changed when the Supreme Court in Sujitra Srivastava and another was a Chhattisgarh administration recognized the right of reproductive autonomy as a fundamental right. Recently, the Supreme Court in Puttaswamy specifies laid emphasis on women's constitutional right to make reproductive right decisions and upheld the ruling of Sujita's case. I think this was also mentioned by Lakshmi ma'am in the first part of her words. And let's conclude my presentation. Women in the society is facing many problems regarding the gender stereotypic discrimination. When we analyze the historical background, the women were not provided with any of their basic rights, and several struggles were made to achieve some of the needs of the woman. Now also, the patriarchal oppression of woman is pulling her back in deciding her own choice in life. After the birth of each girl, their life starts with the parents and then it be transferred to the hands of the husband. From that moment itself, the woman's sacrifice towards her family begins and she keep agreeing to the needs of the spouse. But the actual issue raised is that whether the woman is a doll belongs to the hands of a man. Initiating the thought is the main reason for the expansion of the concept of marital rape. Marital rape is an act by which the sexual intercourse is done without the consent of the spouse, and it is considered as a form of domestic violence and sexual abuse. While we go through the domestic rights, reproductive rights of the woman, it is to be noted that every stage of woman's life is to be directed by a woman and men equally. Inequality in taking decision regarding the choice of reproduction is absolutely a violation against the rights of women. In order to substantiate marital rape along with the reproductive right, it is clear that the woman who is a victim of the marital rape is being pregnant, then the choice of abortion will be vested with the victim. The threat towards the reproductive rights to be removed, and it should be absolutely done with the consent of the woman. When to reproduce is the choice of women, not the choice of men. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. Now, the term marital rape I think that's something which is a bit early to discuss in Indian society, because that the word marital rape that you have been using, mostly people prefer to hush it under the carpet. Even though
Yes,
you criminalize marital rape under section 375 IPC exception 2, but the age factor is also there. Basically, the exception 2 specifically excludes acts of sexual violence in marriage from the ambit of rape. So the law has been construed in such a way that even though there is a sexual violence within the ambit of marriage, if you are above a particular age, the law is hesitant to take it into the purview of rape. But if you look into the same exception, 375 IPC clause 2, the age parameter has been set down where you say that sexual intercourse by a man with his own wife when she is below the age of 15 years of age is rape, regardless of the fact whether it has been done with her consent or without her consent. So basically, like in advanced societies where the consent of the woman is required in certain acts in close proximity which she has to have with her husband, whether she has got a choice, whether she can also be a participant in that particular act. So that has to come up in Indian society. And if you look into some of the judicial decisions with regard to this particular issue with regard to the consent in a relationship, particularly in a marital relationship, mostly we find that the patriarchal view has been taken by most of the judges, saying that in a closed room when something happens, and that too between a married couple, at what stage you gave consent and at what stage you withdrew consent, that that's a matter where you the evidence can only be given by those two partners. So we take it in an evidentiary point of view also. you may not be able to prove that case beyond a particular point. Basically, in a marriage relationship, an implied consent is also there for a more proximate relationship. So when you deny that to one partner, maybe the man may be coming up with a human right violation, and that can also become one of the grounds for divorce. Denying him that particular relationship when or that particular right when that is so. There has been conflicting opinion with regard to the human right issues regarding these areas, but again even though we keep it under carpet, there is a time, the time has come up for a woman to raise that particular issue. Mostly the family may not also be siding with the woman in such cases, but we cannot deny the fact that violence in marital relationship is happening from the part of the partners. So maybe alcoholic or drug abused or mentally perverted partners will be there, or certain persons engage into such types of behavior, and the bodily integrity and dignity as well as the right to life of the wife or the woman has also to be looked into in such cases, and the law has to change, and it has to recognize that this concern of marital rape that is happening in the society. So what I feel is that if you look into the exception 2 to section 375 IPC, that age factor, maybe the law is keeping it so that there need not be any misuse from the part of the partner, but that grave crime that you cannot keep your eyes closed to the situation that if you look into statistics also, you find that basically marital rape is happening, and most of the women are silent victims
Yes,
to
ma'am.
such
They're not
crimes.
expressing their view to the society,
But
due
if,
to
if,
their
if you
family.
take it, if you take it to the court of law also, from the evidentiary part, they may not be able to put it, and they can prove the case. So that issue is also there.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your valuable comments. Ma'am, next, I invite Gifty Maria Matthew and Bipasha Manoj, students, Mar Gregorius College of Law, Trivandrum, to present their topic, Right to Privacy as a Tool in Progressing the Reproductive Rights of Women.
Good afternoon, everybody. We actually have a few slides to share, so we will be sharing them on our topic right now. Are the slides visible? Hello?
Not yet, not yet. They're not visible.
We try. Oh dear. Let us try switching off our video and sharing the screen. Moves that it will appear.
Pasha, I have a suggestion. If you could put this, I mean, you could send the slide to me. I could, in which case.
Yes, ma'am. Give me 1 second. I'll send it to you.
Yes, yeah. You can send it to me through WhatsApp. I'll share it.
Yep. Yes, ma'am. I'm sending it to you right now.
Let me just share it. Just hold on a minute.
Thank you.
Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am. Now, if you could just please put it in full screen.
Full screen. Okay. 1 minute.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So we will be talking about a right to privacy as a tool in progressing the reproductive rights of women. Let's move on to the first slide, and Dipti will be taking over. Ma'am, next slide, please.
Yeah, the slide is not moving. Can I just go back to the normal view and see if it moves?
Yes, ma'am, it's more than.
This is the first slide, is it?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
So to begin with, we focus on the right to privacy as a tool for expanding the purview and ambit of women's reproductive rights and its limitations in vouching for meaningful enjoyment of reproductive autonomy. We have not dealt with the reproductive rights of men, intersex, transgender, or gender non-conforming people, essentially due to lack of association of and inclusion of these individuals in reproductive discussions and provisions throughout the world. Ma'am, would you go into the next slide?
I have moved in. Can you see it?
Thank you. Yeah, yes. So introduction, reproductive rights comprise the various facets pertaining to reproductive autonomy, free from coercion and violence, access to reproductive health care, and sex education. According to the United Nations Population Fund, these rights arise out of established human rights, protections inter alia, the right to liberty and security of the person, the right to equality and non-discrimination, the right to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress, the right to health, and the right to privacy. Right to privacy. While no universal definition of right to privacy is available, privacy enjoys a robust legal framework internationally. Article 12 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 and Article 17 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights 1966 legally protect persons against arbitrary interference with one's privacy, family, home, correspondence, honor, and reputation. Article 7 and 8 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union 2012 recognizes the respect for private and family life, home, and communications. Privacy can also extend to other aspects, including bodily integrity, personal autonomy, informational self-determination, protection from state surveillance, dignity, confidentiality, compelled speech, and freedom to dissent or move or think. Reproductive rights through the right to privacy. The right to privacy has historically been used as a global instrument to establish reproductive rights. The primary link between the two stems from the fact that laws and policies which impede upon individuals' rights to access sexual reproductive health services may also interfere with individuals' right to privacy and to make autonomous decisions as it pertains to their health and fertility. Reproductive rights through the right to privacy, landmark American judgments. So the first case that we have referred to is Griswold versus Connecticut, 1965 American case. So there was a Connecticut law which prevailed that made it a crime for married couples to use contraceptives or for anyone to advise them about or help them to obtain contraceptives. It was struck down by the United States Supreme Court. The court held that in forbidding the use of contraceptives, the Connecticut law represented an unwarranted governmental incursion into the private realm. The next case is People versus Bellis, a 1969 California case where a gynecologist from California, Leon Bellis, was convicted of conspiring to perform an abortion based on an abortion referral he had made for a young college student. The California Supreme Court held that the state's criminal anti-abortion law was vague, as it could not be determined with certainty when an abortion was actually necessary to preserve the life of the pregnant woman, and thus the court declared the law unconstitutional. The California Supreme Court also held that the right to privacy discussed in Griswold also protects a woman's right to make her own decision about whether or not to carry a pregnancy to term. The next case is Eisenstadt versus Baird, a 1972 American case. So here, Bill Baird, a birth control activist, was convicted for distributing contraceptives to college students at Boston University in direct violation of a Massachusetts law, which prohibited the exhibition or distribution of contraceptives to unmarried persons. The groundbreaking United States Supreme Court decision in the case extended the right to privacy articulated in Griswold to unmarried persons. Over to you, Vipasha.
Thank you, Gifty. So after landmark American precedents, we will now be moving on to India's recognition of right to privacy. And we will be looking in detail into the Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India case. So retired High Court Judge K.S. Puttaswamy brought this case to the Supreme Court as a constitutional challenge to the new Aadhaar scheme according to the Aadhaar Act 2016, which mandated a biometrics identity card for access to government services and benefits. The Supreme Court upheld its constitutional validity, declaring that its legislative passage as a money bill was legal and valid. Nevertheless, the Supreme Court of India marked a landmark judgment by recognizing the right to privacy as a fundamental right through this case. Moving on to the next slide, we'll be looking into the opinions of the judges. So according to Honorable Justice Chandrachud in his plurality opinion, privacy in its simplest sense allows each human being to be left alone in a core which is inviolable. It also stated that privacy postulates the reservation of a private space for the individual, described as a right to be let alone. The concept is founded on the autonomy of the individual. Now, in the concurring opinion by Honorable Justice Bobde, a right to privacy may be situated not only in the Article 21, but also simultaneously in any of the other guarantees in Part 3. In the current state of things, Articles 19, Clause 1, 20, Clause 3, 25, 28, and 29 are all rights helped up and made meaningful by the exercise of privacy. In his opinion, he also included that privacy is the condition or state of being free from public attention to intrusion into or interference with one's acts or decisions. Now, if we look into more opinions from the judgment, Honorable Justice Chandrachud draws on Anita Allen's work on unpopular privacy to define privacy as inclusive of distinct and separate subrights as shown in the slide, such as the right to spatial control, decision autonomy, and informational control. The judgment of the 4 judges in the Puttaswamy case held that spatial control denotes the creation of private spaces. Decision autonomy comprehends intimate personal choices such as those governing reproduction, as well as those choices expressed in public, such as faith or mode of dress. The court paved the way for a breakthrough in reproductive right jurisprudence by identifying 3 core values to ground the right to privacy: autonomy, bodily integrity, and dignity. Importantly, the Supreme Court cited its decision in the Suchita Srivastava versus Chandigarh administration to recognize that within the constitutional right to personal liberty under Article 21 lies the right of a woman to make reproductive choices, noting that this right was deduced from a woman's right to privacy, dignity, and bodily integrity. Now, the plurality opinion found that women's intimate personal choices, such as those governing reproduction, fall within decisional privacy. Honorable Justice Nariman states that the right to abortive fetus falls within the realm of privacy interests, while Honorable Justice Chelameshwar writes that a woman's freedom of choice whether to bear a child or abort her pregnancy are areas which fall in the realm of privacy. The opinions in the Puttaswamy case are particularly promising because they have engaged with significant global feminist critiques. With that, let us move on to the next slide, which is feminist critique on privacy facilitating reproductive autonomy. Now, feminist jurists argue that the privacy rights often fail to ensure that women's reproductive autonomy within family or marriage, where their own preferences may differ from others who hold power in these spaces. Another feminist perspective sees the right to privacy as creating a sphere of autonomy that would allow women to make independent reproductive decisions. Historically, though, harms have been done to women under the guise of privacy, and this has made them view the right to privacy as potentially counterproductive in this manner. Now, the plurality opinion in the Puttaswamy decision, authored by Justice Chandrachud, is acknowledged to have responded to these two feminist critiques by affirming that privacy situates privacy within individuals and not only spaces, and that this creates positive as well as negative obligations on the state. Now, we'll be moving on to the last part of our presentation, which is the limitations to right to privacy as a tool. Now, the first limitation we will be exploring is privacy as a fragile right. While the Puttaswamy decision held that the right to privacy is recognized as a fundamental right, it remains unenumerated in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court has held that there is no absolute right to privacy. Although the right to privacy is not contained in the Constitution, it is a right inferred from Article 21. The court in the Puttaswamy case also relied on individual liberty, operationalized through the ideas of dignity and autonomy to conceptualize privacy. It is important to note that the Puttaswamy decision overrules the cases of both MP Sharma and Kharak Singh, where the same court had held that the Indian Constitution does not provide for a fundamental right to privacy. The second limitation is non-inclusivity of the notion of privacy. Privacy is often afforded only to heterosexual marital family between a husband and wife and within the boundaries of Indian culture. Despite Justice Chandrachud's opinion centering the individual as the bearer of the right to privacy, concerns remain that without an intersectionality analysis, the right to privacy ultimately leads to deprivation of marginalized persons' right in the name of ensuring the rights of the more privileged. In the context of reproductive rights, concerns remain that judicial perspectives on the legitimacy of restrictions on autonomy may still be shaped by the notion of good abortions occurring within the context of rape or marriage versus bad abortions occurring as a result of what is perceived to be irresponsible decision making. And the third and last limitation we will focus on for now is the privacy as insufficient without equality. In the Puttaswamy case, Justice Chandrachud's opinion identifies privacy as a subset of liberty and states that some liberties can only be exercised in a private space. But decision autonomy, that is the right to choose as an integral aspect of the right to privacy and personal liberty, is not freely accessible and can only be realized with a host of other conditions. To conclude, in India as well as globally, the unequal impact of a non-comprehensive approach to reproductive rights has catalyzed support for the reproductive justice movement, which in turn reflects the recognition in human rights law that those most marginalized must be central in the analysis of autonomy. With this, we end our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vibhash and Gifty, for your paper on right to privacy as part of reproductive right. Basically, they were on like the right to reproductive choice should be rooted on the right to privacy, and both of them were be like the right to privacy. The tool of right to privacy should be expanded so that the scope and purview of reproductive rights should also be enlarged. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was the end of the presentation, and now it's time for discussion, ma'am. It's all up to you, ma'am.
So if there is any question with regard to any of the presentations, you can ask the presenters. Or if you want to add on some of the topics, you can add on that. If there is a question to be posed to the student coordinator, you can put in the chat box and the student coordinator can read it out so that to whomever it is addressed, they can answer that particular question. Any query or any additions, or if you have a different stand, you can make your comment.
this is a general comment. I'm sorry, I'm not able to address it to a particular presenter because I think one theme was present throughout all the presentations that reproductive autonomy needs to be given priority.
Can you address yourself, Anto?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, yes, ma'am. Sure. This is Sushma here. I was your rapporteur for the session.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah,
okay.
I was just wondering how do we balance this whole need for reproductive autonomy on one side with protecting the institution of the family, because any unrestricted use of the right to reproductive autonomy will seriously threaten the institution of the family too. If the paper presenters have any comments on that, while I completely appreciate the fact that we live in a patriarchal system, and that's why we have had to fight for these reproductive rights over a course of time, and that fight is not over. I mean that challenge is not over. So I don't know if this question is a little too early, but how do we balance those two? Because even in the MTP, in the current context, consent is a requirement, if I'm not mistaken, and yeah. This was just my general comment. Yeah.
Anybody would like to answer? So basically, in the institution of marriage, what I feel is that there has to be equality between the partners. There has to be an understanding between the partners, and the love and care and affection between the partners should, and the responsibility should be equally shared between the partners. Basically, if you look into 1 or 2 generations back, we find that basically the 2-child norm was not there. Basically, you had more children in the family, but as part of without any legal restrictions, also as part of natural selection. Now we find that physically also in the present day society, we find we find that even fertility rate among the couple is basically very less in the new generation. So basically, even if you ask for reproductive autonomy issue in the present situation, the funny side that I find in the present situation is that you go for fertility treatment even for a single child, that issue is always there. And basically, if the law tries to restrict it by a 2-child norm, maybe in the future situation, even though religious taboos may be there or the societal taboos may be there, but if you have to be a candidate for certain posts, now itself the 2-child norm is coming up. If you are in the government service, if you are not getting any protection for the facilities for the 3rd child. So basically, the law is coming up with the 2-child norm. That part is there. And again, if one of the partners or the family, a particular family or a particular custom or a religious group wants to have more child, and if the woman is not agreeing for more children, then the issue of reproductive autonomy may come up. And as Sushma ma'am was rightly pointing out, in certain cases, that rift between the partners may lead to some issues between them, and a divorce or a breakup in the institution of marriage may happen. But basically, in the institution of marriage, other than the interference of law, I feel that there has to be an understanding between the partners with regard to the spacing of the children as well as the number of children that they should have, taking into consideration the health of the woman also. So maybe educating the girl child as well as not only the girl child, but educating both the sexes with regard to the physical conditions that a woman may undergo when she is carrying on with the pregnancy, and if the spacing of the child between the child is lesser, so the impact that can happen upon a woman and physical as well as the emotional impact that can happen on a woman, so that has to come up within within the system itself rather than the law enforcing it. So that will be a better tool. Otherwise, it will be the decision of the partners itself to have more children or less children, or the spacing between them.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Sensitization and education is important. Thank you, ma'am.
So anybody on any other topic you want to discuss? So if no more questions, can we come to the conclusion of the session?
Yes, ma'am.
Sushma ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I thank our session chair, Dr. Lakshmi, ma'am, and our rapporteur, Sushma, ma'am, and every one of the speakers on behalf of Mar Gregorius College of Law for your valuable time and effort taken to bring this conference to a success. And also kindly request all the participants to fill the feedback form. Kindly request all the presenters to submit their final paper on or before 22nd November 2021. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all.
I would also like to give a special thanks to Dr. Jijimon V.S., Associate Professor, Head of the Department, for inviting me to this session. Thank you, sir.
Participants, please note the form is in your chat box. Please fill it up right away.
Lakshmi, thank you very much. Thank you for joining and sharing the session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.